like to thank you for inviting me to present this work and to apologize for the troubles I had with the technical aspects. So what I would like to present today is the works we are running in the team we have in Montpellier called CAMIN. So I am Christine Azevedo, I'm an INRIA research director, and we are located in Montpellier, South France. So the topic of my talk is about neuroprosthetic-based assistive solutions for sensory motor impairment applications. And you will see tomorrow another presentation from someone from my team who will enter in some details that I will maybe not cover today. Just to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So neuroprosthetics are electronic medical devices that are interfaced with the nervous system to compensate for a failure of an organ or a function. So this can be the definition we can keep for today. And it's important to have in mind that these interfaces, so the electrodes, are placed in contact with the nerve tissue, either to record activity from the tissue, either to stimulate it. So in the second case, we talk about active electrodes. And they record what? They record the activity of the neurons that are involved in the targeted function. It can be hearing, vision, or motor actions. All this is possible because the transmission of information in the neural tissue is chemical or electrical, which is the one that we are interested here. So we can record it and also trigger it. So all the work I will present is based on this, the fact that the electrical signals, so the action potentials, are conveyed along the cell membranes. So as I said, there are in the middle of the slide, you can see the two types of interfaces. So either the recording electrodes or the active electrodes. They can be an interface with the nervous tissue. It can be the central or the peripheral nervous tissue. And of course, based on all this, there will be some signal processing, let's say in a general term. We will need to filter, for instance, for the recording electrodes, filter the signals, detect peaks, classify, all these type of methods that will be helpful. And when we are in the active electrode part, we try to stimulate the system, we will go into optimal control, closed loop control, and so on. So we can find neuroprosthesis in different applications. For instance, to restore sensory function, a well-known cochlear implant. So the idea is that the environmental sounds are captured by a microphone and then encoded to be converted into pulses that will stimulate the auditory nerve fibers. So this is one type of neuroprosthetics. The pacemaker also. So in this case, we want to contract the cardiac muscle. So the idea is to send impulses that will trigger the heart muscle contraction in the correct way to have a nice pace. In our team, we work with the functional electrical stimulation. It means that we mainly activate skeletal muscles to retrieve functions. So it's a well-known technique that is used for years and years now. So you applied a series of current pulses above the muscle, for instance, to activate the nerve, in fact, and to trigger a muscle contraction. So basically, the main parameters that we can find will be the current amplitude of the pulses, the pulse width, and the frequency. So depending on these parameters, we will activate or not the fibers and generate a tetanic contraction. So contracting one muscle is something that is used quite often in physiotherapy and so on. But if we want to restore a function, we will need to contract and to coordinate the contractions of different muscles in a nice manner to have, for instance, the person with the hand paralysis to grab an object. So stimulation can be applied to any type of skeletal muscle, even in the case of a spinal cord injury, because in most of the cases under the lesion, the nerves are still present and the motor neurons are still preserved. So if the motor neurons are still preserved and the muscle is still intact, so when you have a lesion after an accident, for instance, you still can activate the muscles under the lesion. So there are different applications that are quite well known now. grasping restoration, help for the drop foot syndrome in post-stroke patients, bladder emptying, all these applications that are quite well known today. Our team was involved in a project with the associate team with the Brasilia University. It was called Cacao Team. And the application was to use this electrical stimulation to restore pedaling in persons with complete lesion of the medulla, either paraplegia, either tetraplegia. And so the objective is to coordinate alternatively the contractions of both legs, extensors and flexors, depending on the position of the crank of the cycle. So this is quite easy explained like this, but of course there are some challenges that have to be solved. And these challenges are the fact that when you have a lesion and after some time the muscle decrease, the fibers start to disappear. So you need to train properly the leg muscle. This was the object of the collaboration with UNB. We worked with the physiotherapy university to try to find training protocols that will lead to a nice training of the muscles that we use after for propelling a bike. Stimulation has also main drawback is that fatigue occurs quite early. So because we don't activate in a natural manner the fibers, so there's a lot of work in how to find nice patterns of stimulation that will decrease the fatigue, and to also counteract this fatigue effect, and also to face the different things that can happen in the terrain, like uneven terrains, or a slope, a ramp, and so on. We have also to work on optimal control based on models to try to face these challenges. Our teams, so UNB and our team participated in some events called Cybathlon in Zurich, Switzerland. It's an event where different technical solutions are used and compared during competitions. And for instance, here you can see the bike, FES bike discipline. So all this work can lead to have a nice cycling even over ground. You can see it's not perfect. There's still some things we could improve probably. And this is the objective of the work that François Bailly will present to you tomorrow, how to improve this control to be more fluid, less fatiguing, and more efficient. From this point, the collaboration also moved to UFMG in Belo Horizonte University with an associate team with them called Goiaba, where we also work on these thematics with the electrical engineering faculty. Stimulation can also be used in upper limb to restore grasping. I think I said it a little bit before. So if we place electrodes on the surface of the skin, we can have some function restored. As you can see, it's not perfect, but you can have some application of this type. The problem with surface stimulation is that, as you can see here in this slide, in the arm you have a lot of small muscles and sometimes quite profound. So with the surface electrode, it's difficult to activate in a selective manner the different muscles. As you know, the hand has many possible gestures, many fine, and it's very difficult using electrodes on the skin surface that will move also to have something nice and efficient. So that's why for some years now, people are trying to think about implanting electrodes directly inside the muscles to be really selective on which muscle should be activated when to restore different types of grasping, for instance. Some years ago, there was a nice product that was sold by an American company. So the principle was to implant electrodes on the different muscles implied in the gestures they wanted to restore. So each patient was choosing which type of gesture task he wants to achieve. So these electrodes were implanted in the muscles. There were electrodes, epimesial means on the surface of the muscle, intramuscular inside. Surgery lasted 6 hours, and 300 patients were implanted, and 7 in France. Here you can see some pictures. So one of the patients that was implanted in France by the medical doctor that is part of our team, Dr. Fatal. So you can see it's quite old-fashioned and vintage, but it was working quite nicely. So on the left, you can see the metal, the small metal part is to control the triggering of the stimulation. So when the person was moving the shoulder in one direction, it was associated to a given stimulation, and so a given movement, for instance, opening the hand or closing this finger, so on. So for this patient, the result was quite nice. She was able to eat by herself, to write, etc. So it was quite a success. The problem was that that device stopped in 2001 for economical reasons. So there were no more implantations from that point, and the patients that are implanted, each time you have a failure, somewhere in a technical failure, there's no more replacement parts. So this was until from 2001, there was no more product on the market. So this is one of the reasons we proposed the new approach and the new solution. Sorry? Okay. And the new solution called AI-end. So the idea is to have only 2 electrodes, so not 1 electrode per muscle, but electrodes around the 2 nerves that innervate the muscles of the arm, and to propose a product of this type. And among the partners that you can see below, there's Neurinov, which is a startup that was built by some colleagues from our team to really go from this idea to the product. So as I said, the idea is to stimulate the nerves, so quite far from the hand, and from the nerve to be able to activate the different fibers that are inside the nerve. So you can see the principle. In a nerve, you have different fascicles, and what we would like is with a multi-contact electrode around the nerve to be able to selectively stimulate different groups of muscles. So this work started 10 years ago already. There was a lot of work on modeling the interfacing between the nerve and the electrode to try to see which configuration, which contacts of the electrode with which parameters will lead to different activation of the muscle fibers that you can see below. And we had some experiments with 4 participants implanted during 28 days with 2 electrodes. And I just let the video running for you to see how it's working, letting you know that in 2026, we hope to have the first completely implanted solution, because right now the electrode that you can see in the screen was implanted, but the cables were percutaneously outside the body to be connected to the stimulator. I will go further, not to lose time. So there was a surgery, and 5 days after the surgery, we could try to stimulate the person. This is the sensor that triggers, depending on the contraction of the muscles, it will trigger opening of the vein, closing of the vein, etc. So you will see some movements. So opening the hand, extensors, flexors, extensors again, and you will see some movements. So this patient was completely paraplegic for 2 years when he started to use the device. And so for the first time, he could grab a bottle and take it to his mouth, eat by himself, etc. Of course, it's still difficult for him because he's not trained to use his hand, but the grasping was really nice and efficient. Maybe while there's the video, if I don't have time, you can ask me questions or let the video go to the end as you prefer. There will be several participants testing the device. So the tasks were chosen by the patients themselves, depending on what they wanted to have back as a function. So signing, eating, and so on. So of course, without the stimulation, they have no movement at all of the fingers, and they could not do that by themselves. Okay, so with this, I can conclude my presentation. So you saw different uses of neuroprosthetics and the type of projects we are working on in the team. Thank you.